Okay, this is the review for the Unit 7 PreAP test. Okay, on the first view, all you're doing is you're adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing. So really the main thing when you're adding is to make sure that you're combining like terms. In that you are not combining, you're not adding the exponents. So for instance, I see a 9x cubed, and then a 2x cubed, that's going to be 7x cubed. And then here I see a positive 5x squared, and a negative 8x squared, that's going to give me negative 3x squared. Here I have a positive 11x and a positive 9x, that gives me 20x. And that's all there is to combine. Okay, on the subtracting, okay, the main thing that you have to worry about with the subtracting is that you are distributing that negative, which makes all the signs the opposite. So that becomes 2x squared y, positive 10xy, and then minus 7. And then at this point, you're just going to go back to what you did previously, where you're combining like terms. So here I see a 2x squared y and a 1x squared y, so that gives me 3x squared y. I see a positive 8xy and a positive 10xy, so that gives me 18xy. And then I see this negative 6 and the negative 7, and that gives me negative 13. Okay, with the multiplying, I'll do number 6. So on number 6 with the multiplying, you could set it up like this. So you just multiply each one, okay? Some people will prefer to use the box, so they may come over here and they'll set it up as a 2 by 3. So whichever way you choose to do it, make sure that you are adding the exponents because you're multiplying. Okay, so either way is good. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start filling out the box since I drew it. So for this one, this would end up being 6x cubed because of the x to 1 and the x squared. This would be negative 8x squared because there's two x's you're multiplying, and then y. And then this would end up being 4xy squared because you can't really add any of those exponents because they're not alike. Down here you would have 15x squared y. On this one here you're going to have negative 20xy squared because of the y there and the y there. And then on this one you're going to have 10y cubed. Okay, so your final answer here would be 6x cubed plus, I'm going to combine these. That gives me positive 7x squared y. I'm going to combine these, and that gives me negative 16xy squared, and then plus 10y cubed, because there's nothing to combine that with. Okay, I'll do number 7. Alright, so the most important thing about 7 and 8 is making sure that you're doing the parentheses and the squaring first. So before you can even deal with what's going on the outside, I need to multiply 3x plus 6 times 3x plus 6. That gives me 9x squared plus 18x plus 18x plus 36, which is 9x squared plus 36x plus 36. Okay, so I've taken care of just this part. Now I'm going to multiply the whole thing by 1/3. Because it's 1/3, I'm really just going to divide each of these by 3. And so I'm going to end up with 3x squared plus 12x plus 12. And that would be my final answer. So again, the most important thing is make sure you square that times itself, and then at that point, multiply it by what's on the outside. All right, on number 9, on this one here, I'm just using long division. You cannot use the synthetic. And then remember, with your dividing, you always want to make sure you have placeholders. Kind of ran out of room there. So, for instance, see how this goes 3, 2, 1 constant? Pretend like this was not here. If it went straight from x cubed to minus 4x, I would need to make sure I put a plus 0x squared here to hold all those degrees in the same order. All right, so on this part here, I'm going to ask myself x squared times what gives you x cubed? It's x. And then if I multiply that x, I'm going to multiply it by all of this, okay? So that gives me x cubed plus x squared minus 6x. Remember, the first term always cancels out. This changes to a minus, and this changes to a plus, because remember, you're subtracting, so you have to distribute a negative. So that gives me 2x squared plus 2x, and then I'm going to drop the negative 12. All right, x squared times what gives me 2x squared, so plus 2. And that gives me 2x squared plus 2x minus 12. And it will always, not always, I'm sorry, it will all cancel out. So your answer is x plus 2. And again, if you wanted to, if you were to multiply this and what you got for your answer, it should get you back to what you got here. All right, on number 10, I could use synthetic division because it's just x plus 5. But for instance, on number 11, I could not use it because there's a 3 in front of that x. All right, so here, if I use the synthetic division, just like here where we always have to flip signs, I need to make sure I do the same thing here. So when I do that, I'm actually doing it right here at the plus 5. So I'm going to make that positive 5 into a negative 5. And then I'm going to list all of my coefficients and my constants. So there's a 1 right there, so 1. Notice here how there's not an x squared. It goes from 3 to x. So I got to put a 0. I'm going to hold that place value. And then 10 and then 18. Okay, I'm going to drop the 1. I'm going to put a little multiplication sign there, just kind of remind yourself that you're multiplying. So negative 5 times 1 is negative 5. And then if I combine that, I get negative 5. Negative 5 times negative 5 gives me 25. And 10 plus 25 is 35. And then negative 5 times 35 is negative 175. And here, I'm then going to combine, I think it's 157. Okay, so because my answer here started with a cube, this has to be 1 degree less. So this will be x squared minus 5x plus 35 minus 157 over x plus 5. That's with the synthetic. All right, on number 12, remember here all you're really doing is you're just dividing these numbers and then subtracting the exponents. So 27 divided by 3 is 9. Remember there's a 1 there, so 3 minus 1 is 2, so x squared. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Again, 2 minus 1 is just an x, and then minus 1 because you're dividing the same thing. All right, on the back here we have factoring. So all of these here are going to be your sum and difference of cubes. You'll notice on 15, in order to do sum and difference of cubes, I first had to factor out a GCF. When you are factoring, you need to always look for a GCF. That's the very first thing you should do. So the very first thing you should always do is look for GCF. Okay, so on number 13, you'll notice there's not a GCF. There's only a 1 here, so it would just be a 1. Now, x cubed is a perfect cube and 27 is a perfect cube, and there's only 2 terms. So boom, right away I know I'm going to do difference of cubes. So I'm going to have the same sign, so same, opposite, and then always positive. All right, so in the first blank, I'm just going to have an x because the cube root of x cubed is x, and then the cube root of 27 is 3. That's my a and my b. Then I square the a and the b. So that gives me x squared here and 9 here. Now, I don't care that this is a negative. Once I put that same opposite always positive, I don't change the signs. And then for the middle here, I just do 3 times x because you multiply the a and the b, and that gives me 3x. Okay, These are all going to be the same. All right, on this one here again, it says factor completely. Even if it doesn't say factor completely, you need to always factor completely. And then again, we're always going back and looking for that GCF. So looking at number 17, I noticed that all of these can be divided by 2, but I also know that they're going to have at least 2 x's in common. So I'm going to pull out 2x squared. And when I pull out 2x squared, that leaves me with x squared here minus x minus 2. Now, I need to now ask myself, can I factor more? Can I do difference of squares? No, because it has a middle term. Can I do sum and difference of cubes? No, because it's a squared. Can I do factor by grouping? Well, I only have 3 terms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the factoring we've been doing the whole time. So here I notice that my a is 1. So I'm just going to think what 2 numbers will multiply to get negative 2 and combine to get negative 1. Well, the only factors of 2 because it's prime are 1 and 2. And then this would be your negative. And so that would work. So I could factor this further. So I have my original factor of 2x squared. Then I'm going to take this one, and that becomes x plus 1. And then I'm going to take that one, and it becomes x minus 2. So again, you're always having to check to see if you can factor even more. Our number 19 is an example of factor by grouping. You could use the box, or you could do the grouping. Now, the reason I know it's factor by grouping is because I have 4 terms. So when you have those 4 terms, that's when you want to do the factor by grouping, or if you use the box. So for instance, on number 20, I've got 4 terms. I'm going to use the box here. Again, you don't have to. If you wanted to, you could just group them here and start pulling out GCFs. So this would be 6x cubed minus 16x squared. And you got 21x and minus 56. Now, you always put an x on the corner. The only difference here, though, is that you need an x cubed. So in order to get the x cubed, I'm going to pull out the x right here, because this is where they have the greatest common factor of 2. So that's there. And then I'm going to start looking at every column and row, because I need 6x cubed. And if I just put a 6 here, that may not be right. So the greatest common factor of 6 and 21 is actually 3. And the greatest common factor of 6 and 16 is 2. Alright, so 2x squared times negative 8 is negative 16x squared. And then 3x times 7 is 21x. So here you have 3x minus 8, 2x squared plus 7. And I can't factor this any further, so I'm finished. Alright, let's take a look at number 22. Again, I'm looking for a greatest common factor. I notice that I can pull out a 5 here, so 5 and then an x. That will leave me with x squared minus 9 on the inside. So I pulled out the GCF. Now I'm going to see if I can do any sort of grouping. I notice that I have a perfect square here and a perfect square here. So I can actually do difference of squares. So this here would become x plus 3, x minus 3, and then again my original greatest common factor of 5x. Okay, on this one here, the first step you really want to do here is you need to multiply the a and the c. So pretty much the same process we had been doing the whole time. So on this one here, I'm going to multiply the a and the c, and I get negative 21. So what 2 numbers will multiply to get negative 21 and combine to get 4? Well, that's 7 and 3, and then this would be my negative. Okay, so if I write everything out, I have x squared plus 7xy minus 3xy minus 21y squared. Okay, so I'm going to group them. And again, I like to leave the negative out because a lot of people forget it, so that's why that's out there. Okay, so I'm going to pull out my greatest common factors. The first one would just be an x. And then on the inside, I would have x plus 7y minus, and then I'm going to pull out greatest common factor here. For 3 and 21, it's 3. They don't share an x, so that can't be a greatest common factor, but they do share a y. And then on the inside, what I would have left is x plus 7y. So my first factor would be x minus 3y, and then my other one would be x plus 7y. Okay, on these here, finding the perimeter, I'm not going to do these. Just understand your perimeter. You're adding all the sides. So add all sides. Okay, and then again, you're not adding the exponents, just combining what's alike. Over here, though, be careful. Make sure you understand that you need to do all of the sides. So you can't just do the two that they give you. You have to also know that the other sides have to be all combined. Okay, on these down here, so for instance, they're talking about area. So for area, they're talking about multiplying. So you multiply. And that's because area equals length times width. Okay? So for this one, I would multiply the length times the width. So I'm going to do 1 plus x times 2 plus 3x. Okay? So that gives me 2 plus 3x. That gives me 2x. And that gives me 3x squared. Okay, so what I'm now left with is 3x squared plus 5x plus 2. Alright, same thing on this one. The only difference is that you'd be multiplying a binomial by a trinomial. That's the only difference. Okay, on the other side, this one says the area of the base of a rectangular sandbox measures 2x squared plus 3x minus 2. The height of the sandbox measures 4x. Determine the volume. So to do volume, it's length times width times height. Now, if you remember back to junior high, you also had the formula big B, which was the area of the base. So the area of the base would be the length and the width, so those are the same. So that's the area of my base. And then the height is the 4x. So I'm just going to multiply. So if I do 4x times 2x squared plus 3x minus 2, that gives me 8x cubed plus 12x squared minus 8x. Alright, on the next one it says find the area of the shaded region. So on this one here, you need to make sure that when you're doing this, you're subtracting the largest from the smallest. Okay, so for instance, here, this would be my smallest one. So on this one, if I do 3 times x minus 1, I get 3x minus 3. Okay, so that's my smallest one, would be 3x minus 3. And then if I multiply this, that'll give me the area of my largest one. So I would do, let's see if I have room down here, so 2x squared plus 7, and then 4x minus 3. That gives me 8x cubed minus 6x squared. And that gives me 28x minus 21. Okay, so up here, for the largest one, I'm going to write 8x cubed minus 6x squared plus 28x minus 21. But then remember, I'm subtracting that. This is where a lot of people are going to mess up. Because I'm subtracting this, I have to distribute that negative, and that positive 3x becomes a negative, and the negative 3 becomes a positive. So then at this point, I'm just going to start combining what's alike. Nothing else has 8x cubed or a squared. If I combine those, I get 25. And then if I combine those, I get negative 18. So that's my area. Alright, on number 29, it says a rectangular storage container has a volume. Okay, that's my volume. The height of the container is x plus 2. What is the area of the base? So again, volume equals length times width times height. They're giving me the height. They're giving me the volume. So to find the length and the width, I need to divide the volume by the height. And now it's telling my length and width. Okay, so let's do that. Now I'm actually going to use synthetic division here. And again, the reason I can do that is because it's just x plus 2. So I'm going to start off with a minus 2, because remember we always are flipping signs when we divide. And then I'm going to list all the coefficients and the constants. So 1, -2, -13, and -10. Alright, so if I drop that 1, -2 times 1 is -2. That gives me -4. -2 times -4 is 8. That gives me -5. And -2 times -5 is 10, with a remainder of 0. So again, because this started with an x cubed, it's going to start off 1 degree less. So x squared minus 4x minus 5. Okay, here's the problem though. They also want the length and the width. So because they want the length and the width, I now need to factor x squared minus 4x minus 5, and then that will tell me the length and the width. Okay, so because my a is 1, I can just find out what two numbers multiply to get -5 and combine to get -4, be 1 and 5, and then this would have to be the negative. So my length could be x plus 1, and my width is x minus 5. Now, again, you could switch these. This could be the length, and that could be the width. It doesn't matter. All right, on the last one here, it's talking about Tesla has studied the number of Model X's and Model 3s that have been ordered over the past year and came up with the following model. Write a polynomial model to model the total number of Model X and Model 3 vehicles that have been ordered over the past 3 years. So here, all you're doing is you're just adding, okay, because it says total. So you just want to combine like terms. Okay, so if I were to combine those, that would give me 28x squared. If I combine that, it gives you $627. And then if I combine those, it gives me 11,500. Okay. All right, that should be about it. If you have any questions, make sure you get an Eagle's Nest pass from your teacher, or you go in for tutorials. All right, good luck.